Welcome to our webinar on proactive care planning, where we will review the importance of why this type of planning is so important and how to communicate your wishes in a legal document called an advance directive. In this webinar, we'll be walking through the Washington State document created by Honoring Choices Pacific Northwest. This webinar will be most effective if you've taken the time to print the document in advance and can have it to follow along with. Feel free to pause the webinar now, if needed, and access the document for print on our website, which you can see on the slide here, www.peacehealth.org/advance-care-planning. My name is Hilary Walker, and I am the program coordinator for advanced care planning for PeaceHealth Northwest Network. I am a trained facilitator and instructor through Honoring Choices Pacific Northwest, and am honored to be with you here today. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of today's topics. We're going to be talking about the discovery of advanced care planning and why it's important, how to reflect on your values and personal beliefs, how to select a healthcare agent, how to express your wishes in a legal document, which is called an advance directive. And once you've completed the document, how do we share the document? Where do we store it? Where do we keep it so it's most useful? So let's first talk about what is advanced care planning. So advanced care planning is the process of talking about future healthcare decisions if you are unable to speak for yourself. And this process of the conversation allows you to name the person or people that you would trust to make medical decisions on your behalf. Ideally, advanced care planning is for all adults 18 years of age and older. And once you have had these conversations and clarified and discussed your goals, values, and wishes, these conversations and ideas go into a legal document which is called an advance directive. Now let's prepare for the part of the webinar where you will be asked to participate by getting out the Honoring Choices document. So the picture that you see on the right of the screen here should look familiar. That should be the front of the document that you're looking at. Again, this is the Honoring Choices Pacific Northwest document for Washington State. At the top of the document, you can see the words Advance Directive. An advance directive has two parts. The first part is the durable power of attorney for healthcare. This is the part of the document where you speak to the person who you would be choosing to make medical decisions on your behalf and have the opportunity to name them and provide contact information. The second part of the document is a healthcare directive, and that's where you have the opportunity to make decisions around what kind of care you would or would not want for certain medical situations. So in this part of the webinar, we are going to use this opportunity to guide you through a workshop. We're going to go through the document page by page. For the sake of time, I won't be reading all the instructional parts of the document word for word, but I would encourage you to read the document after the webinar. There's a lot of really good information embedded in this document. There may be parts of the document that you do not wish to fill out at this time or you feel do not pertain to you. Please feel free to cross out any sections that you don't relate to or don't want to fill out at this time, or you can write NA, not applicable, so that those reading the document will know that you chose not to complete this part. Keep in mind that you will be able to revise the document at any time. I encourage you to keep your pen moving during this workshop and know that you can print out another copy of the document if needed. Alternately, you can also use sticky notes. So if you want to keep notes along the way as we're going through the document of ideas that you have, things you want to think more about, people that you want to talk to, really encourage you to use this time to move towards completion of a document. As we go through the document, you'll notice down in the right-hand corner that there is a space for your name and date of birth. I encourage you to at least do that part. That's the easiest part of this whole process, is to just write name and date of birth on every page, and that will keep you going. So please keep in mind that you're creating this document for your current self. So we often call these quote unquote living documents that you can revise or revoke at any time. So for example, if you're listening to this webinar and you're 72, you are completing this document for your current self, not what you think you might want when you're 80 or how you might feel when you're 80. So you're filling it out for your current self. So I just want to talk briefly about the difference between an advanced directive, which we'll be going through today, and a POLST form. There's a little bit of wording about a POLST form on the front page of the Honoring Choices Advanced Directive. And POLST stands for Provider Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. Sometimes this bright green color that you're seeing is the Washington State document. There are different colors in different states. So as we spoke to earlier, an advanced directive is really for anyone 18 years of age and older. The POLST form is most appropriate for individuals who are seriously ill or frail, who would want to limit the kind of medical care they would get from emergency responders. So this is an out-of-hospital medical order. It is meant to support your medical wishes, but it's specifically to communicate to emergency responders, anyone who would wish to limit the kind of medical care they would get, for example, when 911 is called to your home. Some people call this a DNR order, which is a do not resuscitate order, because you do have the opportunity to speak to whether you would or would not want CPR in certain scenarios, and we'll be talking more about that later. But I like to just bring up that there is a significant difference between an advanced directive and a POLST. They do often work together for a population of people who do need a POLST as well as an advanced directive. And if you have questions yourself on whether you would benefit from having a POLST or whether you should have one for yourself, please do talk with your doctor about that. It is a provider order. You can get these documents from your provider's office. Okay, so now I invite you to turn from the first page of the document and turn to page 1 of 8 of the Durable Power of Attorney for Healthcare. So I just want to speak to the fact that there's a lot of language around advanced care planning that can get confusing. So a Durable Power of Attorney for Healthcare can also sometimes be called its acronym DPOA. Someone might say, this is my DPOA when pointing to a person. Who you name on the Durable Power of Attorney for Healthcare as your medical decision maker is sometimes called a healthcare proxy, a surrogate decision maker. There's lots of words for it, but this document will be a communication tool to whoever you're going to name as your medical decision maker. So if you notice at the top of the document, it says Durable Power of Attorney for Healthcare, preparing a healthcare agent. So this is different than many power of attorney for healthcare documents that have you just name the people you want to advocate for you, and it doesn't give a lot more information. What the Honoring Choices document does is the first several pages are actually useful information that will prepare your medical decision maker to make decisions on your behalf. So you'll see more as we go through it, but I just wanted to point that out. It might seem strange to have things like values and wishes and things like that on a durable power of attorney, but I think it will make sense as we're going along. So you see on this document, the first question that is asked is, what matters most to me? So instead of jumping into any medical decision making or any kind of medical treatment you may or may not want, we're going to focus first on who are you and what matters most to you. So the checkboxes at the beginning are used to get your mind going. And for some of you, and maybe many of you, you may check every box. So for you, all of these things may feel important to you in order to have a good day. Communicating with friends and family, being free of or have minimal pain, being able to feed and bathe and take care of myself, etc. So for some of you, you may check every box, and that might be important for you right now. But just keeping in mind that there are some who may not be able to get through the day without having significant pain, or they may already be having life-sustaining treatment such as a pacemaker or dialysis, and they're still having a good day. So it's just to get your mind going of what's really important for you to be able to have a good day. The next section on this page is the following is what living well or a good day means to me in my own words. So it gives you an opportunity to write in your own handwriting, in your own language, what a good day means to you. Think about it in the way of what I value about my living is. So it's an opportunity for you to get really clear about what's important to you so that if this document is being used in the future for someone to guide making decisions on your behalf, you're giving them some information about who you were when you completed this document and what was important to you. So some examples might be what I value about my living is being in my own home, getting to spend time with my grandkids, being out in my garden, watching the sunset from my porch while enjoying a glass of wine, whatever it might be for you. So I encourage you to spend a little bit of time here and really write what a good day means to you. So we're moving on to page 2 of 8. And the first question at the top of page 2 of 8 may be a little bit challenging to wrap your head around if you haven't thought about this before, but is very helpful information if you had a sudden or unexpected event that was actually an end-of-life situation. The question is, if I am dying, I would like to be, and there are 3 check boxes. So if you were dying, if you knew that it was an end-of-life situation for yourself, where would you want to be? The first option is at home if care is available. So it's important to keep in mind that if care is available, these documents are to state your preferences. So if you had a choice and your number 1 choice would be to be home if care was available, then we check that box. If you know that you would want hospice involved, you're welcome to write that in your own handwriting. Again, this is a statewide document and not all communities have hospice. So if you, anytime in the document that you want to write anything in your own words to make things more clear, feel free to do that. So the second option on this section, if I am dying, I would like to be, the second box is in a hospital or a nursing facility. So sometimes people feel strongly that they would not want to be in their own home. They don't feel like that would be good for their family. They have had an experience of someone else dying in the home and don't want to do that. Or they would feel more comfortable having professionals around them as they're going through that experience. And that's totally fine. It's for you to communicate what you feel is most important. The third box is, if I am dying, I would like to be, it doesn't matter to me. If it doesn't matter to you, that's also fine. You'll notice there's a little space there for you to say why. So again, you're giving as much information as you can so that anyone using this document to help guide your care would be able to really understand what you meant by your choices. So an example might be, it doesn't matter to me, whatever's easiest for my family, or whatever's cheapest, or I just haven't thought about it. So I encourage you to just get detailed if you choose that it doesn't matter to you. The next section on page 2 of 8 is fairly unique to the Honoring Choices document, and I really like it, and encourage you to spend some time with this question. What religious, spiritual, personal, or cultural beliefs are important to you and would be helpful for others to understand about you in order to give you the best care possible? So that may be related to medical treatments. You may, because of your religion or personal beliefs, not want blood products. You may have strong feelings about certain kinds of medical treatments. So you can write about that here. I also encourage you to think about any rites or rituals or ceremonies that would be important to you if you were seriously ill or at end of life. Are there certain poems you would want read? Are there certain books that you would want read? Are there songs that you would want sung? Are there certain people that you would want there to really to support this part of your being? So I encourage you to spend some time with that here. You can see right below that, it gives an opportunity for you to name somebody who can support you and your family in regards to your religious, spiritual, personal, or cultural beliefs. That person that you're naming on this part of the document is not your medical decision maker. It may be the pastor of your church or a chaplain you really connect with, or a very dear friend who you know who knows that part of you well and can support you in that way. So we're getting into, we're about to step into the part of the document where we are going to be talking about some medical scenarios, and we'll be talking about the wording life-sustaining treatment. So this part I am going to read word for word because I think it's really helpful for us to understand, what does that question even mean? What is life-sustaining treatment? So feel free to read along in the document that you have. Life-sustaining treatment, also sometimes called life support, can keep you alive by maintaining or replacing important bodily functions like breathing using a machine. Some examples of life-sustaining treatment are cardiopulmonary resuscitation, also known as CPR, breathing machines, feeding tubes, kidney dialysis. I would also add that in some situations, antibiotics are considered life-sustaining treatments. Life-sustaining treatment may be used temporarily until a body can function on its own. In other situations, life-sustaining treatment can prolong the dying process without the possibility of cure. This last sentence is really important as we're thinking about advanced care planning and our own well-being. Easing pain and providing comfort are part of routine care and are not considered life-sustaining treatments. So it's important to understand that your pain, your breathlessness, anxiety, your hygiene, your dignity, all of those things will always be attended to, even if you're choosing not to continue with life-sustaining treatment. So again, I'll just point out at the bottom of 2 of 8 is a chance for you to write your name and date of birth. Again, to keep your pen moving, and also if a page gets separated, then we know where to return that page to. So we're going to turn to page 3 of 8. So the top of page 3 of 8 has a scenario that we would ask you to consider. Consider the scenario and how would you want your care guided in this scenario. So again, I'm going to read this word for word so that you can hear it out loud. A sudden event, such as a car accident or an illness, left you unable to communicate. You are getting all the care needed to keep you alive and comfortable. The doctors believe that there is little chance that you will recover the ability to know who you are or who you are with. So feel free to read that scenario a few times before stepping into the options section of the document. So we're asking you to think about, I want my healthcare providers and healthcare agent to do the following. There's several options for you to choose from. The first one is, the first box, continue medical treatment to keep me alive, even if there's little chance of getting better. So continue medical treatment to keep me alive, even if there is little chance of getting better. So you will see under that option is an exception box. You can choose that exception box if there are certain types of medical treatment that you would not want. So I would want to be kept alive, but I would not want dialysis, or I would not want a certain type of mechanical device. What I would encourage you to do on those lines under exception is to consider 3 things. If you would continue medical treatment, even if there was little chance of getting better, one thing I want you to consider speaking to on this document is why. Some examples would be a reason why somebody would want to continue treatment is I'm young and I would want to give it a chance. I have a really strong prayer group. I believe in miracles. I have a family member who went through something and recovered, or whatever it might be. So why would you want to continue treatment if there was little chance of getting better? And for what period of time? Can you think in your mind, how long would you be willing to be in that type of situation and have your family be with you in that situation if there was little chance of getting better? 2 weeks, 1 month, 3 months? We can't really say. If you want to talk more in depth about this, feel free to talk with your provider and see what makes sense. The third thing I would hope that you would consider if you would want to continue treatment is what would be your acceptable anticipated outcome. So if you would want to continue treatment, even if there was little chance of getting better, would it be only if you would have full recovery, if you were able to live without life-sustaining treatment or machines, only if you could return home? I hope that makes sense, that if we would choose to continue treatment in a very extreme scenario where there's little chance that we would get better, it's very helpful for our family to understand why and what are we hoping for. So the second choice to consider in this scenario is stop medical treatment to keep me alive and allow a natural death while keeping me comfortable. So again, you will always be offered comfort-focused care. Your pain, breathlessness, anxiety, etc. will always be cared for. So that is the second option, to stop medical treatment to keep me alive and allow a natural death while keeping me comfortable. The third option is I want my healthcare agent to decide for me. And I will tell people when I meet with them, you don't get away with just choosing that box. One of the reasons why you're taking the time to listen to this webinar and complete a document is so your healthcare agent doesn't have to decide for you. But sometimes people will choose that box in addition to one of the above boxes. For example, I would want to continue medical treatment even if there's little chance of getting better, but I want my healthcare agent to decide when enough is enough, and saying a little bit more about that. There may be financial considerations that you want to come into play. There may be relationship considerations you want to come into play. Another example of wanting my healthcare agent to decide for me is sometimes people would choose stop medical treatment and allow a natural death. And I want my healthcare agent to decide for me on timing. So if your family lives far away, I wouldn't want to continue medical treatment, but I want my healthcare agent to decide when enough of my family has arrived before stopping treatment. Things like that to keep in mind. So again, I encourage you to spend a little time with that scenario. If you feel like you need clarity, please talk with your provider. This is a good time to mention that Medicare and most private insurances will reimburse advanced care planning conversations with your provider. It is a reimbursable visit, so it's very helpful to let your provider know in advance that that's what you intend to talk with them about so they can be prepared. If your document is already on file, they can review it in advance, but just to keep that in mind that these are conversations to be having with your doctor or your healthcare provider, and please feel free to ask for some clarity and guidance as needed. So the second part of page 3 of 8 is not related to the scenario above. So if I had a little magic wand, I would create a little dotted line between the two. The next thing we're going to talk about is CPR. So again, this is in reference to who you are in your current state of health, not related to the above scenario. They just happen to be on the same page. So I'm going to share a slide with you looking at the CPR guide. This is a guide that was created by Honoring Choices Pacific Northwest, and it is to help people understand what CPR is, will CPR work for you, and what are some side effects or things that may happen to you if you receive CPR. So this document is also available on the PeaceHealth website that is on the first slide. We'll also bring the website information back up at the end of the webinar. So if you want to print this out, you're welcome to do that. So I just want to share a little bit about CPR. You can see here, I'm just going to read directly from the guide on a few parts. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR, is a procedure used when your heart and breathing stops. CPR includes a breathing tube to help get oxygen into your body and deep pushing on your chest to move the blood. So those are sometimes called compressions. I'm sure most of you have seen CPR on TV, if not in person yourself. Electric shock to the heart using a defibrillator or an AED may also be used. Medications may also be used to restart the heart and keep the blood flowing through the body. So will CPR work for you? And it's important, again, to have a more in-depth conversation with your medical provider if you have concerns or questions about whether it will work for you specifically, given your medical situation, your medical history. But you can see here on this guide that CPR works best if your body is healthy, and CPR is started right away, right when your heart stops. CPR is less likely to be successful if you are weak, elderly, or have a chronic illness. National studies show that 18 to 30% of people who receive CPR in a hospital setting survive and are discharged from the hospital. Of those who do survive, 28% of them have significant neurologic disability. And the reason why that is because a big function of our heart is to take oxygenated blood back to our brain. So for every minute we go without our heart pumping, we're losing oxygenated blood to the brain. And just some things to keep in mind with what does CPR, what are some things that can happen to us during receiving CPR, excuse me, or after receiving CPR. You may need to be on a ventilator, which is also called a breathing machine, because of weakened lungs. You may have bruised or broken ribs from chest compressions, and you may have brain damage because of lack of oxygen to the brain. So we spend a little bit of time here on CPR specifically because it's really important for people to understand the success rates of CPR and whether CPR is effective for you. And again, I would encourage you to talk more to your provider about that if you have some more questions or concerns. So we're going to go to the next slide, which shows the back of the CPR guide on the right-hand side, and you'll see my decisions around CPR are divided into 3 sections: yes, maybe, no. And if you look at page 3 of 8 of the Honoring Choices Advanced Directive under CPR, this yes, maybe, no correlates with the 3 boxes you see on the document. So the first box, yes, would be I want CPR attempted if my heart and breathing stops no matter what. That's a strong yes. The second box is the maybe. And what this speaks to is I would want what this says is I would want CPR for my current state of health unless this document is being used to guide my medical care and I now have the following. I now have a disease or an injury that cannot be cured or changed and I am already dying. There's now little chance of survival if my heart stops. There's little chance of long-term survival if I receive CPR, or little chance of returning to the quality of life that I have already discussed with those who are important to me. So that middle section says, I want CPR now, but if I have a sudden event or an illness in the future and no longer would benefit from CPR, I give permission to my medical decision makers to at that point make me a do not resuscitate. So that's the maybe, that's the middle section. The third option under CPR is I do not want CPR if my heart and breathing stops. Instead, I would want to die naturally. So if you feel that right now in your current state of health and your current state of living, that you would not want CPR attempted if you had a cardiac arrest and your heart and breathing stopped, then that would necessitate the need for one of the POLST forms, the physician order for life-sustaining treatment, in order to allow you to designate yourself as a do not resuscitate. All of these ideas and concepts are very complex, but I'm hoping that this webinar is helping you understand what some of your options are, and really maybe helping you discover some questions that you need to take back to your provider to get more clarity in order to complete these documents. So we're on to page 4 of 8. And the first part of 4 of 8 is around pregnancy. So I can say now, if you are a male or beyond childbearing years, you can just cross this section out. But it's important to understand for those of you that are still in childbearing years or are potentially helping family members complete these documents who are still within childbearing years, that Washington state law states that all measures must be taken to save both mom and baby, regardless of an advance directive if a person is known to be pregnant. We do include this section here for an opportunity for you to write what your preferences would be, either for care of yourself or care of the baby, if you were known to be pregnant and had a sudden unexpected event or injury. Just being aware that those preferences may or may not be able to be followed depending on the situation. And again, if you are pregnant and listening to this webinar or are in childbearing years and have more questions, please feel free to speak with your provider. The second section on page 4 of 8 is additional directions. This is one of my favorite parts of the document because it allows us to get creative with what's really important to us. What hasn't already been mentioned? So if you keep in mind that if we have a sudden or unexpected event or injury or illness, and we are unable to communicate, those who care about us and are closest to us are going to want to do something. They're going to want to know what they can do to help love us and care for us in this time. So something to consider to get your mind going is to start with what brings me comfort is. So for example, would you want music? And if so, what kind of music? Do you have a preference on the number of visitors that come to visit? Are you somebody who would want only one visitor at a time and keep things kind of quiet, or would you want a party going on in your room? Do you have a preference about lighting, whether you're near a window or the shades are drawn? Do you want the television on or off? How do you feel about touch? Do you want somebody to put your makeup on every day or shave your face every day? Or do you hate when people touch your feet? Things like that, just keeping in mind that when people step into a room of somebody who is critically ill or potentially at end of life, there's a really strong desire to do something to bring comfort and care. So if we can give some guidance, it's super helpful. And this is an opportunity for you to do that in additional directions. So when we turn to page 5 of 8, we are going to start talking about what is a healthcare agent, Who should you choose as your healthcare agent? What happens if you don't choose a healthcare agent, etc. So just to clarify again, the pages before this, page 1 through 4, were all about preparing your healthcare agent. So as you were going through that process and thinking about who might show up at your bedside, who would you want there, who has that strength and that courage to really be there for you in that way, now's an opportunity for you to consider who those people are. So what is a healthcare agent? I'm not going to read this page word for word. I encourage you to do so in your time, but I'm going to call out a few things. So a healthcare agent is the person you choose to make medical decisions for you if you cannot make them for yourself. You authorize this person to make decisions with your healthcare providers about your care. So I'm going to go to the next slide and just speak a little bit more about choosing a healthcare agent. So some of the requirements of a healthcare agent is they have to be at least 18 years of age or older. 18 years is very young to make medical decisions, but sometimes that's the person that is closest to us, but they must be at least 18. Your medical decision maker, who you name as your healthcare agent, cannot be your physician or a physician's employee. So I just want to say there are obviously exceptions to that. If your family also works as a nurse in the hospital where you receive care, that happens a lot, especially in small towns. You are still able to name your family member. They just need to be aware that when they're acting as your healthcare agent, that's the hat they're wearing. They are not your nurse or even an employee of that medical facility when they're acting as your healthcare agent. Your healthcare agent also cannot be your administrator, owner, or employee of the facility where you live or receive care. So again, some exceptions to that could be a family member or a close friend. And there are just some things to keep in mind if you are naming somebody in those roles. There's a lot more information on the document as far as some of the requirements. What are the qualities of a good healthcare agent? This is a really important piece to think about, is whoever you name on this document should be willing to have the conversation about your values and wishes. So quite often I'll be meeting with people and they'll say, well, I was going to name my son, but he won't talk to me about any of this. That's a really big thing to think about and a thing to consider when you're naming your healthcare decision maker. You want to be able to have these conversations now and understand where that person is coming from and help clarify what your wishes and values are. So the person you choose should be willing to follow your wishes, even if they don't agree with them. They may not agree with your wishes, but they should be willing to follow them or be willing to ask questions now if they don't understand. Another quality of a healthcare agent is to being able to make decisions in stressful and emotionally challenging situations. This is a really big thing to consider. Sometimes people will have multiple children or multiple siblings and not really sure who to choose. But if you think about who in your family or group of people that are close to you are able to make decisions in stressful and emotionally challenging times. And lastly, whoever you name on these documents must agree to be your healthcare agent. So you want to make sure that, that you talk to them about it in advance before you name them on this legal document. And we're going to take a little break from all of my talking and going through the document and watch one of my favorite videos about choosing a healthcare agent from the Conversation Project, and just take a little break and bring some humor into this conversation.
Be your healthcare proxy? Like if you need someone to tell the doctor what to? I just go with whatever the doctors say. I wouldn't want to bother them. They're so busy. Doctors know best, right?
Be your healthcare proxy? Sure, I'd be happy to if I'm in town. Check out my Instagram pics from Peru. Wish you were here.
Oh, I could never let you go. I can't even throw a plant away. As long as it's got one little green leaf. I'd be like, can't we upload her to the cloud?
Well, heck yeah! I've given this a lot of thought. Let me tell you what decisions you're best off going with. You never let them resuscitate you. And if they even try to hook you up to one of those breathing machines, never! I got this! I totally got this!
How can you even talk about this? I can't, okay? I just can't. Mom, it's not like you're gonna die. No, I can't talk right now.
Oh wait, did I show you that meme from iFunny? The cat and the dishwasher? Oh my gosh, okay, so the cat's like, bleh. And then he's like, wah! Oh wait, sorry, what?
Well, hon, you and I have been through so much together. Here's what we'll do. We'll sit down, we'll get a cup of coffee, and you tell me what matters to you.
Well, it wouldn't be easy. I mean, I'd be sad, but I'd have your back.
I remember when we went through this with Mom, we really spoke for her. So I think I can do that for you. Let's talk about what you would want.
So I love that video, and it gives me an opportunity to tell you about the Conversation Project. There is a link to the Conversation Project website on our PeaceHealth website, and they have a lot of really wonderful tools on how to talk to your family about advanced care planning. And they have some other funny videos too, so I encourage you to check out their website. Okay. So let's talk about what happens if you don't choose a healthcare agent. So you can see here we have a picture of the Washington State Legal Order of Decision Making. This document is also available on our website for print if it would be helpful for you to have a copy of it and share it with your family. So keeping in mind that if you have a medical emergency and you are unable to speak for yourself, we have to talk to somebody. And this is the Washington State Legal Order of Medical Decision Making, and you'll see at the top is a guardian appointed by the state. That's not a very common situation, but if somebody does have a guardian appointed by the state, they are the #1 medical decision maker. Second on the list is the named healthcare agent. So if you have named somebody in a legal durable power of attorney for healthcare, then they are your top of the list medical decision maker. If you have not named somebody in a legal power of attorney for healthcare document, the first person we will speak to is your spouse or registered domestic partner. So it's important to keep in mind, some people may automatically choose their spouse anyway. And, but in some situations, the spouse may not be the best person to speak for their spouse. Sometimes it is a very emotionally charged time and it's really hard for the spouse to be that person. In some situations, the spouse may have early stages of cognitive decline, which make it very difficult for that person to make those complex medical decisions. And if you do not have a spouse, next in line would be your adult children. And this is any of your adult children over the age of 18. And you can see there's a small asterisk after children. And down in the corner, you can see if any group has more than one person, they have to all agree on the kind of care you would or would not get. So you can imagine if you had 5 children over the age of 18 and you had not chosen a medical decision maker, things can get quite complicated. If you do not have a named healthcare agent or a spouse or any adult children, the next in line for your legal medical decision maker would be your parents. And this is a really important thing to keep in mind. Again, that asterisk is there. If you have more than one parent, they need to agree on the type of medical care you would or would not get. Next in line would be your adult siblings. Again, any siblings over the age of 18. And the list goes on and on into larger groups of people that must agree on the type of medical care you would or would not want. You can see the next group is adult grandchildren, etc. So this is usually quite a motivating factor to get people to complete their medical decision-making documents and specifically assign a healthcare agent and a legal power of attorney. So we're going to bring our attention back to the actual document, the Honoring Choices Advanced Directive document. And page 6 of 8 is where we get to the part of actually naming your medical decision maker. So this document, as well as most other documents, allow you to name more than one person. The number one person you name is your primary medical decision maker. So that's the first person that you name. They don't necessarily need to live locally. That's a question that comes up for a lot of people. It needs to be the number one person that you trust most to make medical decisions on your behalf. And as much contact information as you can provide is helpful. Then you have the opportunity to name alternate agents. So these people are called on if the first person you named is unable or unwilling to act on your behalf. And there are many reasons why that might happen. So your first alternate agent would come into play if the person you named first was unable or unwilling for some reason to act as your medical decision maker. And then you have the option to name a second alternate. And again, as much contact information as you can provide is very helpful. So we're getting through the durable power of attorney for healthcare part of the document. On to page 7 of 8. There are two parts at the top of this document that allow you to either initial it if you agree with the statement, or you can cross it out if it does not pertain to you. So the first one says, if my spouse or domestic partner is my healthcare agent, I want them to continue as my healthcare agent, even if our marriage or domestic partnership ends through dissolution, annulment, or termination. So this is a very specific scenario. Sometimes older couples will choose to get legally divorced in order to separate their finances, especially if one has a really significant chronic illness. So to not drain their combined finances to care for one of the people in the relationship. But again, this doesn't pertain to a lot of people. You can either initial if you agree with that statement or cross it out. The second statement is reserved for individuals who do not have anyone to name as their medical decision maker. So as people are living longer, and as our culture shifts into people really living longer and people living alone more than in community, we do occasionally come across people who do not have anyone that they trust in their life. It is still really important for you to complete a medical advance directive, so that if somebody like myself or another healthcare provider is called in to help make medical decisions on your behalf, that we have some information about who you are and what's really important to you. So if you do not have anyone to name on page 6 of 8, this would be a place for you to initial, I do not have a healthcare agent. I understand that if no healthcare agent is appointed and I'm unable to make my own medical decisions, that you're asking that your healthcare team use this document to help guide your care. Again, if this does not pertain to you, if you were able to name at least one person on page 6, then you can cross that section out or cross that statement out. So now we're getting to the end of the durable power of attorney for healthcare. It will require your signature, but please do not sign it until you are in front of either 2 witnesses or a notary. They need to see you actually sign the document. So if we go to page 8 of 8, you'll see it gives you an opportunity to have the document either witnessed by 2 people, and please keep in mind the rule for witnesses. Make sure you read that to make sure it's an appropriate witness, or a notary signature. So you do not need to do both. It's 2 witnesses or a notary. And again, name and date of birth at the bottom of the page there. And you can see in blue writing on the slide, this ends the durable power of attorney for healthcare. So that is the end of that part of the document. The second part of the document is the healthcare directive. It's shorter and a little quicker to get through, so you're doing great. And we're going to take another pause and bring some humor into it about medical decision making, a video from Seinfeld.
Jerry, you ever seen the movie The Other Side of Darkness?
No.
It's about this woman in a coma. Well, I couldn't finish watching it, so I want you to read this.
I, Cosmo Kramer, having just seen the movie The Other Side of Darkness, and not wanting to be in a coma like that lady in the movie, hereby want Jerry Seinfeld to remove my life support, feeding machine, lung blower, etc., etc., etc.
Can you do that for me, buddy?
Well, I don't know if what you have here constitutes a legally binding document.
Well, I'm gonna type it up.
Yes, well, of course, but even so, you may want to talk to a lawyer.
Well, Jackie Childs, he put a restraining order on me. I'm not allowed within 200 feet of his office. I couldn't even give him his Christmas present. Did you take this out of the garbage?
Yeah, it's still got some spring in the strings.
Jerry, this is a piece of junk. How are you gonna be the executor of my living will? You see, you can't let go.
Trust me, Kramer, given the legal opportunity, I will kill you.
I wish I could believe you. Hey, Elaine, do you have some free time tomorrow afternoon?
Me?
Yeah, because you're perfect. You're a calculating, cold-hearted businesswoman. And when there's dirty work to be done, you don't mind stomping on a few throats.
Oh, come on.
Situation number 4. You're breathing on your own, you're conscious, but with no muscular function.
Well, would I be able to communicate?
I don't see how.
I don't like the sound of this one.
Yeah, let's pull the cord.
Yank it like you're starting a mower.
Moving on. You have liver, kidneys, and gallbladder, but no central nervous system.
Well, I gotta have a central nervous system.
Okay. 1 lung, blind, and you're eating through a tube.
No, that's not my style.
Boring.
All right, you can eat, but machines do everything else.
I'd stick.
Yeah, stick. Because I could still go to the coffee shop.
That's right.
Oh, Jerry, listen, you know, I saw the rest of that movie, The Other Side of Darkness. The coma lady wakes up at the end.
Oh, I wanted to see that. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
I didn't know it was possible to come out of a coma.
I didn't know it was possible not to know that.
How was Eric Roberts as the husband?
Oh, unforgettable. All right, I gotta find Elaine. You know, she's gonna pull my plug.
Hi. How's he doing?
He's been sleeping a lot. He's still groggy.
Well, I thought a movie might cheer him up. I got him a jean pick.
What happened to Vincent?
I'm kind of off of him. Outlet. Ah.
Okay, moving on to the healthcare directive, page 1 of 3. I hope you appreciate some of the humor that we're bringing into this. I think it's very helpful to keep our hearts light when we're having these conversations. So the healthcare directive is 3 pages. It's a little bit easier to get through. It speaks to specific medical scenarios, and whether we would or would not want medical treatment in those medical scenarios. So this is the page 1 of 3. We're going to break the page down into sections. So here in the Healthcare Directive is a legal document that tells your physician whether to stop life-sustaining treatment and allow a natural death in 2 scenarios: if you have a terminal condition or are in a permanently unconscious condition and you cannot make medical decisions for yourself. So keeping in mind, again, there's a description of life-sustaining treatment, and again, that last sentence is most important. Medicines or other treatments that are only used to ease pain are not considered life-sustaining treatments. So the first scenario that we're talking about is a terminal condition. I'm going to read this word for word and then we'll say a little bit more about it. I understand that a terminal condition means a condition caused by an injury or a sickness that a physician has judged cannot be cured or changed. The terminal condition would likely cause death within a short period of time. Life-sustaining treatment would only prolong my dying. If my physician states in writing that I have a terminal condition and life-sustaining treatment would only prolong my dying, I do want life-sustaining treatment is the first option, or I do not want life-sustaining treatment to be started, and if it's been started, I want it to be stopped. I want to be allowed to die naturally. So in this scenario, again, if you choose, I do want life-sustaining treatment, it's another opportunity for you to speak to why, for how long, and what is your hoped for outcome if you are in a terminal condition and likely to die within a short period of time, but would want to continue life-sustaining treatment. Again, well within your right to choose that. It's helpful to give some more information to your healthcare agents so they understand what your choices are. So one thing that I want to speak to is that one of the most concerning terminal conditions in our country that affects the ability for someone to make medical decisions for sometimes many, many years is dementia. And dementia or advanced stages of Alzheimer's is not necessarily covered under the way that terminal condition is described in most documents. So if the terminal condition of dementia or Alzheimer's is a concern for you, I'm going to speak briefly about a dementia-specific directive. So you can see here, dementia is a terminal condition. It may or may not be covered in the way that most advanced directives or health directives are worded. There is a dementia-specific directive. It is was created by a doctor at University of Washington in Seattle, Dr. Barak Gaster. And you can see the website here will allow you to learn more information about that document, and you can download the document off of this website for free. What this document does, it would be used as a supplement to the advanced directive that we're going through here, speaking to that specific diagnosis. And the document breaks the diagnosis of dementia down into stages, which I really appreciate from my work as a geriatric therapist, that sometimes it's difficult for us to make medical decisions on how we would want to be cared for based on the diagnosis. And it's more helpful for us to think about what the quality of life is that we're living. So the dementia directive breaks the diagnosis of dementia and living with dementia down into mild, moderate, and severe, and lets you speak to what kind of medical treatment you would want in those different stages. So if this is a concern for you or something you want to learn more about, please go to www.dementia-directive.org to download the document for free. There are interviews with Dr. Barak Gaster on his website, and you can learn more there. The next scenario that is included in the healthcare directive is a permanent unconscious condition. This reads, I understand that a permanent unconscious condition means an incurable and irreversible coma or a persistent vegetative state, and 2 physicians have judged that there is little chance of recovery. If 2 physicians state in writing that I am in a permanent unconscious condition, I do want life-sustaining treatment is the first box there, or I do not want life-sustaining treatment to be started. If it's been started, I want it stopped and to be allowed to die naturally. Again, in this scenario, if you were in this situation and 2 physicians have judged that there is little chance of recovery and you would want to continue life-sustaining treatment, I encourage you to, again, answer a little bit more or provide a little bit more information on why would you want to continue treatment, for how long, and what would be your hoped for outcome. So we're going to page 2 of 3 of the advanced directive. And again, we're going to break this down into sections, but this is where we are now coming to the end of the advanced directive document, page 2 of 3. So you'll see at the top of page 2 or 3 speaks to the use of artificial nutrition and hydration. So this is if you had a terminal condition spoken about on the page before, or are in a permanent unconscious condition, I want my healthcare providers and healthcare agent to do the following. Would you authorize your medical decision maker to discontinue artificially provided nutrition and hydration? So keep in mind that if you have chosen to discontinue treatment and allow a natural death in a terminal condition or a permanent unconscious condition, it would make sense in most scenarios to also discontinue artificially provided nutrition and hydration in order to allow a natural death. If you chose to continue treatment in a terminal condition or a permanent unconscious condition, it is very likely that you would need to continue artificial nutrition and hydration in order to continue that level of care. Really what this is speaking to in my experience is that these are usually the hardest things for families to discontinue, because there's a lot of misunderstanding out there that if somebody is at end of life or choosing to die a natural death, that somehow discontinuing artificial nutrition may cause discomfort. In many situations, it can be quite the opposite, that introducing artificially provided nutrition and hydration to the body can often cause discomfort if we're wanting to allow the body to die a natural death. Now, some people say, well, I would want to continue artificial hydration if it was providing comfort. And that is very understandable, and you can choose that. I would encourage you to be clear. So if you choose, I do want artificially provided hydration, and the reason would be for comfort, please write in your own handwriting for comfort, so that those who are caring for you really know your reasoning behind the choices that you're making. Please keep in mind too that this is artificially provided nutrition and hydration. If you are still able to take food and sips of water by mouth, you will always be offered food and water by mouth. So again, this is artificially provided nutrition and hydration, and speaking to whether you would authorize your medical decision maker to discontinue either of these medical treatments. So lastly, there is an additional direction section on the advanced directive. And sometimes people are curious, well, it seems like we've covered a lot. What else would I need to write on this document? So some things to keep in mind are if you are including any supplemental documents. So for example, if you are going to do the dementia-specific directive, it's helpful to write here, please see dementia-specific directive. Another option you have to write under additional directions is how you want your body cared for when you die. So this is one other decision that your family will need to make, or one other question they will be asked by your healthcare team is how you want your body cared for when you die. If you know at the time that you're completing this document, it can be as simple as writing, at the time of my death, my choice is cremation. At the time of my death, my choice is burial, whatever it might be. This can be often very helpful for your family, because in that moment of grief, sometimes we forget the conversations that we've had. And sometimes that this last decision that needs to be made can create conflict in the family. So if you know how you would want your body cared for at time of death, you can include that information here. You don't need to get super specific as far as and I want my ashes spread here, or anything about memorial service, etc. Feel free to write that on a separate document for whoever you believe will be caring for that part of you at the time of death. So now we're getting to the end of the healthcare directive, where your signature will be required. Again, do not sign this document until you are in front of 2 witnesses or a notary. So we're going to turn to page 3, which is the page that allows for those 2 witnesses or notary signature. Please keep in mind the witness requirements, the rules for witness on the healthcare directive are slightly different than on the durable power of attorney for healthcare. So make sure you read that through before you have your witnesses sign. And this is the end of the healthcare directive. There's name and date of birth at the bottom. Once you've completed the healthcare directive, then you have completed the advance directive. So well done paying attention through the webinar. We're going to go through a few more things before we close. So we're going to just go really quickly through checklists or step-by-step instructions for actually getting this document completed. So if you go to the PeaceHealth website, you will see a quick reference guide or a next steps checklist that will look very similar to what we're going to go through here. So as we've been talking, we know that one of the most important things is to decide who will be your healthcare representative or healthcare agent and have a conversation with them about your wishes. You want to complete an advance directive, which includes the durable power of attorney for healthcare and the healthcare directive. You want to make sure that you sign the documents in front of 2 witnesses or a notary. Once the document is signed and notarized and or witnessed, you want to make copies of the advance directive. Always keep the original. You want to give copies to your healthcare agents, whoever you named on the document. You may want to also consider sharing your document with other people in your family who may show up at your bedside. So example is if you have 5 children and you've chosen 3 of them to be your primary medical decision maker and your alternates, it may be really helpful to still share your document with those who are not named on the document. You also want to make sure that you give a copy to your primary care provider. And again, I encourage you to schedule an appointment to talk about advanced care planning with your primary care provider, what your choices are, any questions you might have. And lastly, you want to make sure that you have a copy on file with your local hospital. So here we're giving information on how to get it on file at PeaceHealth. And this is true for wherever you are in Washington State. We are requesting that you mail or fax your document directly to medical records in Vancouver, Washington, to expedite the process of getting it into your medical record. Alternately, if your primary care provider is a PeaceHealth doctor, then they can help facilitate getting a copy of your document to be on file in your medical record. It is very helpful, we are finding, to have a copy of your medical advance directive on file at your local hospital so that we have quick access to it if ever needed. And we know who your medical decision maker is and what medical decisions you've made in advance. Quite often we hear folks that have completed these documents and then put it in a safety deposit box or in a drawer in their desk. When those documents are needed, they're not going to be easily found. So it's very helpful to have it on file at the hospital closest to your home address. There's also information here where you can call medical records. If PeaceHealth is your closest hospital, you can call medical records just to verify that it is on file. So lastly, I just want to encourage you to revisit these documents as you go through your life. We often, in the realm of proactive care planning or advanced care planning, will encourage people to re-look at these documents in the 60s. So at least every decade. If you go through a divorce, then you want to re-look at the document and make sure that you, if you need to, have named a new medical decision maker. If you have a new diagnosis, you want to make sure the document is clear enough and doesn't need to be more specific with whatever diagnosis it is that you are living with. If you have a decline in your health, it would be a good time to revisit your documents and again, have the conversation with your provider about the potential for using a POLST form, the provider order for life-sustaining treatment, to help support your medical wishes in regards to emergency medicine. And the 50 is death, and that is if whoever you have named as your medical decision maker dies before you, we strongly encourage you to look at the document and make sure that the names that are still on there are who you want to step in as your medical decision maker. Another way that the death comes into play is quite often when we go through a dying experience with somebody who's close to us, we learn a lot about what that might look like for us. So we may walk away from that situation, that experience, and think, wow, I didn't think I wanted that kind of treatment, but now I do. Or I thought that I wanted that, but now I don't, or I hadn't thought about that before. The last D is distance, and that just speaks to that every state has different documents. So I would strongly encourage you, if you move to another state, to get familiar with the documents that are being used in that state. That said, if you complete a document, for example, in Washington state, that document will be used to guide care in other states. How much it can be followed word for word will be depending on the state and the facility where you're receiving care. But it's not a bad idea to carry these documents with you as part of your travel documents, so that, again, they can be easily accessed if needed. So I'd like to thank you so much for your time and your attention. We usually teach these classes in person, and we're just given the opportunity to pre-record this class. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I want to let you know that there are many additional resources and assistance available to you if you go to the PeaceHealth website, www.peacehealth.org/advanced-care-planning. And lastly, I wish you a long and beautiful life.